Hello, welcome back to the What Problem Are You Solving podcast. We have a full house tonight, trying a new format, so this will be very fun and exciting. Let's see, you know the three of us, John, Ty, and Adam, but I'm going to let our guest hosts introduce themselves, starting with Angela. Hello and good evening.
Hello, hello. My name is Angela Kuyava. I'm the managing director of the Desai Accelerator at the University of Michigan. I've been there for just a couple weeks shy of 8 years at this point. Prior to that, I was the director of innovation for a global development firm and actually started my career in wealth management. I recently wrote a paper called Customer Discovery 201, which connected me to Adam, and I'm really happy to be here tonight.
Happy to have you. Awesome. Very good. Brandy. Hello and good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, so I'm Brandy and I'm up in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada, and I'm a technology development advisor with Alberta Innovates, and I've been working with entrepreneurs, mostly first-timers that are underrepresented for the last 8 years. And I started as a teacher, so have a non-traditional background and have a master's in social impact, and have been bringing folks like David Bland and Ash Moria to our province to help our mentors learn how to be building better ecosystems.
I know those guys. Very cool.
Did she say
cool
David?
dudes.
Did she say David Bland?
It's just dropping hints all the
Don't
time.
you have an algorithm that it doesn't work in the intros?
Next week.
And last but not least, for first round of introductions, Chris. Hello and good evening.
Hey, thank you so very much. Thank you for inviting me this evening. My name is Chris Hewer. I'm the managing director of the Team Flow Institute. I started my first company in 1994, and I had 5 other type A personalities with me.
Nice.
Didn't go so well. So I've been spending all that time since trying to ask, what does it take for smart people to work well together? I'm a serial entrepreneur. I spent some time at a Big Four. I built a global nonprofit. I ran an accelerator program down in Australia for 6 months. And I met Adam when we were lead mentors in Google's Launchpad Accelerator. So very happy to be here tonight.
Excellent. Super awesome to have you all here. And we'll get to Matt for his introduction in just a little bit. But first, we are trying a first round right before the holidays of a new type of feedback session. And we'll let Adam kick things off to kind of describe what the goal is of tonight and to do some of this live. So it'll be fun. Take it away, Adam.
All right, 2 goals. We'll see if I can be clear. 2 goals to talk about your interviews. So is it true? Here, can you take me off stage? I got to see.
You love being zoomed in.
I can't. I hate being zoomed in. I don't even have the good camera anyway. All right, so Matt, you've done 100 interviews. Is this correct? About, more or less?
Make sure you unmute, Matt.
120, actually.
20.
So a lot of these programs either struggle to get people to do interviews at all, which is clearly not the case. They struggle to get people to do good interviews, which is we're calling technique, or who did you talk to? What questions did you ask? And then the final hurdle is getting people to listen to and make good decisions based on the actual data and not succumbing to confirmation bias. Sounds simple. A lot of great frameworks out there. We mentioned Ash in the pre-roll. I've been following a lot of strategizers been posting about this recently again. They just did something this morning that I thought was pretty interesting. So yeah, without rambling, I've been excited for this episode for 6 months now. The goal is to see if you took one founder and instead of just reporting out at 100 interviews, which Angela can talk about her paper, but that's kind of what I've been looking at. A lot of programs, not TechTown necessarily, but other programs are just throwing entrepreneurs out there. They're doing 100 interviews. There's not necessarily a feedback loop of first technique, then who are you talking to? Are those people similar to each other? What are the pains? What are the gains? What are the jobs to be done? What are the quotes, right? So when you ask them for evidence, they sort of give you a secondhand telling of what they heard rather than the quotes themselves. So yeah, we're going to spend an hour, see if we can break it down very simply. First half, who'd you talk to? What'd you ask them? Focus on technique. Second half, what did you hear? And what decisions are you making based on what you heard? I did dangle, and then I'm done. like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I used to bribe people with cash to just do 100 interviews. I knew quantity back then was not the answer, nor was high valuations, but I did it anyway just to see if people would do interviews. I am trying to flip the narrative and reward the fine people that are teaching this stuff. But I did dangle some AdWords credit at the end. So we'll spend 10 minutes at the end. If he has $500 to spend on AdWords or LinkedIn or any digital ads platform, who would he target it at? And what specific value proposition is he offering? And what's the call to action? So I think that's a very good way of focusing, rather than just saying what he learned, like what is he actually going to do with the data?
All right. Great.
So we're at 30
Matt,
seconds. We'll hard stop in 54 minutes from now, 24 minutes.
my man.
We'll do 4 minutes introduction, 20 minutes on talking about the specific interviews, and then at the top of the hour, we'll switch to what did you learn and what are you going to do?
Yep. So before you get into the wish.com version of Shark Tank, tell us a little bit about who you are and where are you from and what company did you start?
Wait, last thing, and then I'm going to mute it. Ty has brought to my attention one of my crazy forms, but we are trying to get tangible feedback at the interview level from the people on the call, and possibly even customer discovery enthusiasts, and even fellow startups understand what good. Sometimes more so than the team looking at the data. Sometimes a second set of eyeballs. So, John, if you want to drop that one last time, if the folks on the call want to be present and can maybe fill it out after the call, but it's not my crazy idea. If you were judging a pitch competition, sometimes they'll give you a form to fill out while you're judging. I feel bad. These are my friends. I don't like to give homework to my friends. But yeah, I promised Matt $500 in AdWords and feedback, a report on it. So that's what I promised him. All right, I'm going on.
Back to you, Matt.
Yeah, originally from Ludington, born and raised, camping, doing all sorts of fun stuff like that. My first big boy job was being a banker. So I always refer to myself as a recovering banker. Lived in Madison, Wisconsin for a while, moved back to Michigan, got a couple more degrees, and now I teach at Grand Valley State University, teaching entrepreneurship and management. And what led me to RV City Host is I bought my last motorhome in 2019. And my wife is from San Diego. I have a 13-year-old lab and a 4-year-old lab. And as I was trying to show her more places across Michigan, especially as we were making stops close to cities, I just kept running into roadblocks. And yeah, I don't want to ramble too much more, but I could talk about how I waited for a big competitor. I guess I'll mention really quick, to make all these updates, or so I thought, to make it easier to potentially camp in the city, to not have to barter anymore. That was a big pain point I had as a user as an RVer, and didn't happen. So I took spring break of last year, built out a very minimum viable product to see if I could still code a little, and then broke my arm riding my electric scooter at the end of the summer, and coded for a while with one arm, and then I got back on it, and then it kind of led me to this TechTown program, and it just gave me an opportunity to really dive into more of these pain points that I thought and that I was hearing other RVers having.
Excellent.
All right, so what'd you do? How'd you TechTown? You're there day one. How'd you decide who you're going to talk to? How'd you decide? Did you have a hypothesis about the problem? You mentioned a couple of pain points. Started with you, regular story, great story, valid story. Scratching your own itch, eating your own dog food, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, walk us through that journey. Seemed like a seasoned, pretty smart, well traveled, literally. How'd you decide who you're going to talk to? How did you decide what your hypothesis on the specific pain point? And then what'd you do? What'd you do?
Yeah, I started really, really broad, and there was already, some research to go off of, and I've had some form of an idea related to this in a sense. At one point, it was going to be called RV Ale Trail. One time, it was going to be called Holy Host, and it had all these niches: van life, fan life. But what really led me to it was going into the city. And so I just started with the hypothesis RVers want to camp more in the city or camp closer to the city. Um, and because of how Techtown's program is structured and already having a full-time job, I had to go as quickly as possible. What I mean by that is I had to kind of talk to anybody and everybody that I could get my hands on. Right. So any networking event I was going to, 1 week, I even grabbed a lot of students and said, you ever thought about van life? And of course I could usually find a handful of them. Yeah, that sounds cool. So in the perfect world, what I wanted to do and kind of what I thought was the right place to start was people with Sprinter vans, Class B camper vans, because those fit in every single parking spot. But I also knew from my neighbor down the street that has an Airstream, goes to and from Florida every single winter. I've heard a lot of pain points that they've had. I've heard his wife say, I want to go into the city. So without rambling too much, the original hypothesis was really just RVers want to camp closer to the city, just like I do.
And so where did you find your first couple of interviews? Did you say you found with the college kids, or where else did you find these people?
Everyone that I knew that had an RV, that's who I started with, kind of the low hanging fruit for sure. And then it was really kind of back to what I said earlier, usually having an event or two every single week that I go out in the community at. My first question is always, so you have an RV? And then if they say yes, I kind of went into one little spiel. And if they said no, I'd say, do you want to learn how to make money off of us? And then their ears would kind of perk up and I would explain that to them. But going through the customer discovery process, what I learned a lot from that angle, especially people that did not own RVs or didn't camp in the past, was the importance or the length sometimes it took for them to comprehend the idea or to educate them what I was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so anyone else on the panel can jump in and ask more about the technique. How did he find people? What did he ask? How did he manage the data?
So,
Anything like
Matt,
that.
I have a question about your original hypothesis and how that got you or led you to some of these questions that you asked. I'm curious about the hypothesis that people with RVs want to get camp closer to the city, and I'm thinking about Clay Christensen's job to be done to the milkshake, right? So that's always one of the things. Like, so what's the job to be done of the person who wants to park close to the city? Because my thought is that might have driven your initial sets of conversations that you tried to have in your customer discovery process. Just curious about that.
Yeah, especially again, back to the people, if they had an RV, I would say, how do you like to use it? And then very, quiet, let them kind of talk about it. And some people right away would be, for 2 weeks, we go up to Ludington, where I'm from, or somewhere in the UP or whatever, and use their standard 2 weeks. And that kind of not always took me down a set of questions, but at least guided me of what kind of user they were, versus other people that have, back to the Class B, the Sprinter vans and those types of RVs. Retired people that are retired are completely different. So that kind of dictated that type of question, answer dialogue as well. But I was just bringing up something too, and maybe I'm getting a little bit too quickly to where we're going. But I just kept taking notes. A lot of what I was hearing, meaning, and what I tried to do is start to rank their pain points from 1 to 10. And I would classify that based on RV type. So Class B, a truck camper; Class C, somebody that's towing a vehicle; somebody that's towing an ATV; your long schooly RVs. And to keep kind of on that topic, what I would do is, how important is it for them to get water? How important is it for them to empty tanks? How important is it for them to hook up for electricity, or do they already have solar panels? And for me personally, I understand my RV is a little tiny thing. It's only 16 and a half feet long, imported from Japan. So I can fit in any parking space. I don't have the pain point that a lot of these other people had that have longer vehicles. And then the other side of things, what I tried to do is, on the host side of things, to kind of bring it full circle so you can comprehend the whole idea. Competitor platforms already host wineries, farms is a big one. And as they get closer to the city, some of them are at breweries as well. And what I would try to do with host locations is talk to them more about how much of a pain is it for you to have a hose on the back of your building for me to pay you extra money to fill up. Back to the education thing, people don't understand, if you're not an RVer, I'll pay you money to fill up my water tank because it's less weight that I have to drive with, which means less gas money, as well as normally less time, because it just kind of bogs it down as you're driving. So I have to learn more about that, because for me, it's like, it's no big deal, just run a hose. But if they're managing 15 servers and 4 cooks and changing out barrels and doing all these other things, they don't care about that extra, $15-20.
If I can go there, I got a baseline question. How do you define a city?
That has been a great question too, and somebody's asked me that prior in the past. I look specifically. Well, first one thing I did is I scraped out what are the 5 most populated cities in the lower 48, and tried to correlate where some other platforms were doing similar things. But to me, city means anything that is a downtown, that has a walking distance, that probably has a couple restaurants, a coffee shop, a retail store. So that could be by definition, it's probably not a city, but it could be as small as 8,000, 6,000. But a city is also Chicago, Detroit. When I say city, to not keep rambling, the reason I choose that term is because I don't want people to think off-grid in the woods campground. Gotcha. I want you to think, where an event would happen, where they would maybe close down and have a little festival, even in a town of 4,000.
And then a follow-up on that, because I used to live about 2 blocks off of Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And in the city proper, there was, more cars than there are parking spots. So that doesn't work so great there. And I understand you're talking about commercial lots as well, but I would regularly see, people camping on the streets in their RVs or in their vans inside Golden Gate Park. So that was really kind of what drove me. But I've got a more important question. How many of those people have you seen and spoken to who are out there already doing it?
That are kind of...
They're parked on the street. You going around in the city, whatever definition, and go and talk to those people who are RVing in the city already.
Oh yeah, okay. I've talked to people definitely that are just in their RVs. I thought you were referring to like people that are squatting or underhoused or things like that. I have not talked with them, but no, definitely I grab people when I have my RV, especially in the city. Yeah, if you saw my RV, you'd understand, like, people just come up to me all the time when it's parked downtown. And if they have a Sprinter van, they're like, "Oh, where'd you get that? I've never seen that before." So I always ask them, what are you doing with your RV? Are you coming in just for the day? Are you going out to a campground? what does that look like?
And what percentage of the interviews that you've collected for this were those people who you actually met RVing in the city?
Bring up my stats. It'd be a rough estimation.
Just rough is fine. You know.
Yeah, of the 120, 60. I'd probably say of the people I just grabbed that I talked to when I was at other locations, probably 15.
So
All right, so that's a
I'm.
good.
Let me finish this, please. I was, Chris, you were going down one avenue, and I was wondering if you did. I'm going to complete your thought.
Please,
That's in
there's
my
a lot
head,
of
a
avenues.
conversation. And it sounds to me like there is a definite subculture of RVers who like to do this. But when I think about RV, I think about when I take my Boy Scouts, when we go out to the local glamping park, that people would pull their RV and then they have this car that they would pull behind them. And so you were very articulate about the functional part of the job to be done of an RVer. Do I have the water and all the rest of this stuff? But and I didn't hear you talk about the car, but I'm also wondering, like, why I'm still kind of stuck on why do people take a big RV to the city where they have to walk everywhere potentially, and maybe that's the part about the car where they have to drag a car around to get anywhere that's other than within a mile of walking, which to me says wineries, farms, and not the roughing it, but more contemporary, cultured places to park their car. I don't know if that was you were going, Chris, but that's where my head was when you were talking about cars. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think what you're asking is why would somebody with an RV want to go within a mile outside the city and park? Is that what I'm kind of hearing?
Yeah. So if you have one of those big monster ones that are like 30 or 35 foot long or whatever,
Yeah.
and you can't just drive that around Chicago. It's just not going to happen. My wife is from Chicago. You can't drive that joker in Washington, D.C., where I live. And so you have to drag a car, along to be able to do anything with it, or a bicycle, or maybe not a bicycle,
Right.
motorcycle or something. Have you talked to those folks and figure out, like, what are they trying to do when they're doing that? Is it, I don't know, I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, I mean they're trying to do all sorts of stuff. I've talked to at least 3 different couples that have a dream of traveling to every Major League Baseball park across the country, going in, stopping for food. What to kind of answer your question, but part of the goal of this is to keep people in the state of Michigan longer, or other states, as well, instead of them just cruising back to Indiana or wherever they're from when they just went up to the pictured rocks. So people with the longer motorhomes, they're the ones I think with a bigger problem or pain point than even my Class B'ers, because it's such a struggle. So going back to host locations, they could find a church a mile right outside the city, easily pull into 2 parking spaces because there's no one there primarily during the week, or besides Sunday. And then what a lot of people have is electric bikes now. I've talked to a handful of different city folks, transportation departments, because they have those parking lots that are scattered around the bus system throughout the city that are right on the outskirts, that then you could park your big RV there, hop in the public transportation, put your electric bike on it too, and kind of scoot into the city. Because to your point, they don't want to have to go all over the place and all of a sudden get in some one way that they can barely get out of.
Cool. So it seems to me like I didn't know there's a difference between Class A and Class B. So thank you. I learned something today. Thank you.
Oh.
All right, Adam.
All right, I'm excited to kind of turn the corner and get into like the specific problems, we've heard a bunch of different segments as expected, a bunch of different problems as expected, more anecdotal stuff. We've heard a couple of like specific primary source, what the couple actually said, what the wife said. Let's spend 3 minutes back on technique. So you talked about splitting the supply side and demand side. So people that have RVs, then further segmenting all of them, different types. Then on the supply side, the restaurant owner, the brewery owners, you even threw in the state of Michigan, which I assume is another business. They also have a problem, which I think is fascinating when this stuff emerges. You also then talked a little bit about qualifying questions versus like the actual meat of what we call like the customer discovery interview. So maybe if Brandy and Angela want to take us to the top of the hour on like, okay, you asked your qualifying questions. What were you using? You know, we know some of the mentors at TechTown, amazing, brilliant anthropology people, mentors in the ecosystem. Like, what were you doing? Were you doing pains and gains from Strategizer? Were you like, did you have a script? You know, what were you literally doing? That'll take us to the top of the hour, and then I'm excited to dive into like, you know, the water problem for the specific type of, you know, RV user, and then staying away from the solution a little bit. But all right, Angela, Brandy, or anyone else on the technique side?
I have a question. How did you record the information that you were receiving? I heard a lot about going to different events. I know it's not always easy to carry around a piece of paper, a pen to ask people to record their voice. How were you ensuring that you were getting the information the customer said back to where you needed to look through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I did use, and they were encouraging us to use Otter AI. So I was able to use that, I think 3, 4, maybe 5 times, not nearly as much as I was hoping to. I have a S Pen, a Samsung. So that's what I used when I was out and about with people. And I did my best when I got home to look at my scribbles and try to rewrite them down in my Google Doc. But the majority of them were in a Google Doc when I would jump on Zoom with somebody or a phone call, and just kind of took notes from there. And then as that evolved, it turned into that Excel file I was talking about earlier. So then I would classify the different types of RVers, different size RVs, how much they were looking for accommodations, their need for electricity, their need for water, to easily pay, gray water, black water, finding or offering specific parking options, bartering, noise, safety, close access to highways, access to public transportation, access to bike trails. So those were some of the things I was starting to try to measure as I talked to each.
Sorry, were you measuring most of these in the binary? Yes, they wanted this. No, they didn't. I heard
Correct.
you say that you had kind of a spectrum on something, but how were you evaluating that? Was it mostly just binary answers?
Yep. At first I wrote down 1 through 5, but this became, kind of awkward when you're talking to somebody you didn't know. Can you go back to that and rank it from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5? But yes, just, do they have electric bikes? Do you like bartering? Especially, and just to kind of tell everybody, one of my biggest competitors, if they use that competitor, there was a set of specific questions that I would go with, like one being bartering. So one of my biggest competitors, you pay a yearly fee, a yearly membership. It unlocks 10,000 locations across the country to camp at. And this competitor has 250,000 members that pay an average of $100 a year in membership. So they're doing pretty well. And their model is, if I stay at that business, I have to barter $30 is what terms and conditions says. And so I bought $30 worth of beeswax candles, $30 worth of really fruity wine I didn't want to buy. So point of making really quick, that was a big thing that I talked with people in my customer discovery, especially if they were using my competitor platforms, because it's been a huge annoyance for me the last, I don't know how many years I've been using them.
I mean,
It's interesting.
right on
I just went to your website, and as I'm actually looking at it live right now, and John, remember we used to talk about the unrealized capital associated with the Tesla, that it's just sitting there. And so what I hadn't heard you talk about, Matt, is the other side of I think spoke to it, the supply and demand side. So I was focusing on the actual drivers of the RV, but not on the other side of the platform. And where did you get that information? Did you actually talk to the churches, or you talk to the breweries, or whatever, laying out the people that incentivizing? I think they call there's a word for it in the chicken and egg, where you incentivize one side of it, of the platform, to get other people to buy into it. So how did you do that? That's pretty cool. Now that I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was talking to different places that I've stayed at on competitor platforms and asked them, how do you like using this? What don't you like? And one brewery in particular said, well, we just stopped serving food, and so now it's became awkward for a lot of people to come in and you're going to have to buy $30 worth of beer, and especially if they're not a beer owner. The farms that I stayed at, I say to them, what do you do when you have nothing to barter late in the fall or during the winter? I mean, there's still plenty of people going up north to some of the places to ski, and they might want to stop along the highway at some of these farms. So that's where I was seeing some opportunity. But there's two personas that I always talk about, and it's Bob the plumber and Carol the accountant. They've never had a chance to host RVers. They've never thought about it before. And my pitch during the TechTown showcase was all about the draft. And everyone knows the draft NFL record in Detroit. And if there would have been another platform like mine there facilitating RVers who normally have a little bit of disposable income, I could have made that even a bigger thing down in Detroit. My point on that really quick is this would have gave Bob the plumber or Carol the accountant the opportunity to host RVers. There's no other platform out there that I found anyways that makes sense to do that.
That's great. That reminds me of how Airbnb got started. So I have a question for you about the purpose of your interviews. So you were interviewing, you had to do these for your program, but like, what were you measuring when you initially went out? What was your measurement for defining your success of that hypothesis you were testing?
I was pretty confident just talking with a lot of RVers previously when I've kicked around this idea around different iterations that the RVers are interested in this. I mean, we have a hotel on wheels. We don't want to board our dogs. We don't want to haul our kids' stuff and all these other things, right? Like, so my goal is to learn more on the host side. Specifically, I previously worked in an office that was half Chamber of Commerce, half Tourism Bureau. And that was an interesting perspective. So, and I don't think I need to educate you all, but from a tourism bureau, they want hotel rooms, right? That's how they want to fill hotels and get people in charge of tax from that standpoint. I'm going off on a tangent now, but regarding host locations, that's where I quickly kind of started to hone in more and trying to talk to more people. One thing I learned throughout that process that wasn't interesting, but at the same time, I'm not quite sure how I can solve this pain point yet, is all of the cities that are banning Airbnbs. And they're doing that because it affects housing. I don't affect housing, but I bring tourism. And I'm trying to establish a relationship with them. And I think I've got a couple in the works that we might do some pilot programs. But yeah, I'll be quiet from there. I think I answered your question.
I love your narrative and the overall opportunity, but I'm going to come back to the technique stuff that was just asked, because what was the measure of success? It sounds like you went in not with a hypothesis, but a thesis. So therefore you were looking at everything as a positive towards what you're doing. And I'm wondering, how did you measure, positive responses versus negative responses to validate the business opportunity?
Yeah, on the RV side, like I said, I just generally, it was positive. On the host side, to answer your question with something specific, what I was trying to figure out is back to what I had brought up about the process of educating a host location or educating people, because that takes a lot more energy to scale. That takes a lot more time to scale. And so that's what I was trying to figure out on the host side once I validated the RVers, is how different am I, how from a user experience standpoint of stealing host locations maybe from other platforms, and or just bringing different host locations, and what that looks like. And I'm still working through that on the host side, I think, more than anything.
All right, I promised John that I would be good at watching the clock here. So, all right, to follow up quickly on Angela's question about binary, like yes or no questions, how on the technique side, and then we'll wrap it up. How good were you? Rate yourself. And this is hard. Like, this is why we don't want to, sabotage you. This stuff is hard. And so good for you for coming on here. Rate yourself on sort of follow-up questions and getting stories and example, because that's what we're gonna kind of, this second half is a little more challenging, but then the final 5 minutes of the second half will be a reward with the prize, the AdWords, and so we'll make it fun at the end. But the next 15 minutes is going to be it's going to be tough on all of us. So let's so how good were you? Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 about getting stories and examples and sort of, Brandy, what do you call it? Day in the life, like sort of really immersing yourself with, just tell me a story. Tell me about the last time you went on a trip. Tell me about the last time you ran out of water. All right, I got to edit myself sometimes. And then, we're going to quickly jump. Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10?
Just for fun.
I would say I was probably a 6, 7, maybe.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up, Adam?
Of course.
What would have taken you from a 7 to a 10?
In defense of my EIR and my customer discovery specialists, they were really pushing me to do more scripts, and that's what I was trying to do the first couple of weeks. It's like, I'm going to talk to only RVers this week, and next week I'm going to talk to only people that work for cities and zoning ordinances and tourism bureaus and all these things. But it wasn't possible to get that many interviews in. So to answer your question, having a very clear script and being able to hammer that out with the same type of people and then kind of learn and tweak it as you go, that's what would have been ideal.
And we'll just make the turn by saying that TechTown EIRs and customer representing need no defense because they're awesome, all of them.
No, they were awesome. They were keeping me in track for sure.
This is hard. Yeah, it's hard to do it. It's hard to do with a cohort, and in your defense, it's hard to do it. You have this plan for a week, and it's hard to, unless you go, to a festival or to. It is hard to. A week flies by, and you're like, oh shit. Oh shoot, right, John? All right, let's make the turn. So for the next 10 or 15 minutes, let's clearly focus on, the RVers, the most painful thing you discovered, and connect it if you can to evidence. On the supply side, you sort of mentioned pain they didn't have. Like, I don't necessarily want to hook up a hose, which is fascinating. I don't want to be like, did you know that you admitted that? It's not, again, the whole thing's not a setup. But on the demand side, the RVers, you said, which we hear all the time, they're interested in this. Like, what is this? Is this RVing? Is this access to water in a place that they don't have to barter? Like, get as super specifically clear as you possibly can on the demand side, on the RVers, like the problem that you heard firsthand that they actually have. Then I'll shut up and we'll do the exact same thing on, what does that mean, John? I can hear you. You're not muted. I can hear you laughing right in my face. We'll do the exact same thing on the supply side, and then maybe 1 or 2 minutes on, the tourism side, if you had a couple interviews there. And then I'll do it. Yeah, I'm already staring at the clock. So we'll leave 5 minutes at the end. We're not going to have more than that on the AdWords. Before I put myself on mute, what were you most wrong about? Or if you don't want to go there and be vulnerable, you don't have to. Like, what surprised you about each one that was like, I never imagined that an RVer would say this, and I never imagined, that a restaurant owner, and I'm not so gracious, but on the restaurant owner might be that you were surprised that they didn't want the $30 or something. So what surprised you on both sides? And then I think we have a clear structure for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think on the RVer side, I guess some of the biggest quotes, and then I'll say, I guess what surprised me were, or validations is, we have a hotel on wheels, so we don't want to pay for a hotel if there's an opportunity for us not to. I talked to a lot of people that just don't like bartering, especially introverts. They just want to find a spot to park and park. On the host side, it was having to talk to that many people, and within the 8-9 weeks that we did it, I think the most interesting thing was how much I had to educate people that weren't RVers, and I didn't think it would be that difficult to do.
Educate them on what?
Back to what I was saying before about not wanting to travel with water, about little diesel heaters, so we don't need propane heaters and all these other things, solar panels, lithium batteries. I mean, we can stay off grid for multiple days. People kind of think about Cousin Eddie still, from that standpoint, and having to kind of get through that. What surprised me too is I talked to a city in Michigan that they don't close down their downtown, but they allow a bunch of people to camp with Airstreams along their whole main street. But then their ordinances don't allow for people to do that at any other time. And this is one of their biggest events in the throughout the year to bring people there. So that was another interesting thing too to learn.
It's so effective. They don't want to do it anymore. Got it.
Yeah. Right.
So, similar question. What was the most actionable piece of information that you found? You're like, it was so clear that you're like, I know what my next steps are here, or I can immediately feed this into my platform. So not just what surprised you, but what is something that surprised you, and you know that you could do something with it.
Yeah, I think talking to people with the bigger RVs, they want to know the approach of where they're parking, as well as height is very important to them. And back to what I said earlier, my RV is so small, so I don't think about that.
It's funny where that's where the air goes dead a little bit. That's the big, go on. That's how often did you hear that? What did they say? Did you ask for stories? Are you willing to build your whole platform around that, or throw it away?
No. Yeah, no. A couple other ones that come to mind. Once they talked about it, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's obviously a thing. But I talked to one person, and they're, I think, doing well for themselves, but they use an RV travel agency. And this particular person that started this RV travel agency started it over the pandemic when they were traveling the country with their kids. And so I just never thought about that. And I'm like, well, there's probably a bunch of them out there. And I never talked to one, and I probably should at some point, because they would be a great partner, obviously, to work with. But that was a big kind of like, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. Another lady had mentioned before that she would have liked the option, longer RV, towed a Honda CRV. She would have liked the option for somebody to come let her dogs out of her RV. And so in my head, I'm like, how could I facilitate that and add a PIN code or, something like that, or where the key is hidden. But I don't think it's a big enough pain point to develop yet.
I'm not quite sure that I'm able to ask this question in a way that's much different than what you've got, but I'm going to try to here. what gaps in the market did you identify as a result of this that you will uniquely be able to fill? From both sides, because it has to be something that or it could be the hosts have or the RVs want, but what are the gaps that you discovered that you're adding into your platform now as a result of these conversations?
Location for sure, being closer to the city, but I do have a category as outside the city as well. And then the other gap is going to be the ease of not having to barter and being able to book more than one night. Competitor platforms, one in particular, they don't want any driveways. They want 2 acres or more outside the city. That's always kind of been their value prop. The other competitor that is barter only, if I remember correctly, only 37% of their host offer more than one night that you can book. And as a user experience, how this is facilitated on most of their hosts is I reach out to a farm, maybe right outside the city, and say, I book one night. And then in their description, it says, please message us and you can book more than one night for $20 a night. And then what happens is I message them and then I look to my wife and I say, let's do a prayer that they're going to get back to us quickly. Because if they don't, I'm going to lose that state park reservation that has one site left for me to go to XYZ city for the weekend. I know that's a long-winded answer, but it was something I heard from a lot of people that are tired of having to book one night here, or reach out to somebody. They don't know how to pay for a bartering with a church because there's no drop box, and people over the age of 50, if I remember the numbers correctly, 60% have PayPal, and people over the age of 50, only 40% have Venmo.
So Matt, can I offer you some unsolicited feedback for this answer? We got so into the weeds that I want to say you kind of like puked over all of your customer discovery data to us. And we're like, what is happening right now? Like Venmo?
Yeah, I know.
So a framework for, it's okay because you're so close to this, right? So don't feel bad about it, right? It's just like, what's the 50,000 foot view? So to help you, I think, answer Chris's question, a colleague of mine, Craig Elias, has come up with something he calls a 7-second sale. So I want you to try to answer this for both the host and the RVers if you can. So we help our ICP reduce, eliminate, or mitigate their problem.
What's an ICP again for everyone listening?
Yeah, your ideal customer profile. So who's that, like the host, the RVers, who's that customer you're selling to? So we help our customer pick a verb to reduce, eliminate, or mitigate a problem.
Yeah. I would say we help Class B RVers find easy overnight accommodations close to urban environments.
So are you helping them reduce, eliminate, or mitigate? And then their pain point or problem. So you gave me a benefit.
Mitigate the pain of finding those overnight accommodations.
And can you quantify that? Like, what are the implications of not finding that?
As an RVer?
What happens to me? Do I have to drive an extra 3 hours and sleep off the side of the highway? Am I worried about getting arrested? Like, what's the...
Am I saving $30 for bartering? What am I doing?
Yeah, I mean, you could go to a Walmart and somebody that's on something might be banging on the side of your door in the middle of the night. You could get a ticket. Yeah, you'd have to keep driving. Yep.
Okay, so try to refine that with all that data to really get that clear kind of 7-second, like this is what we do to help on that side. From the host side, do you want to try it on that? So what do you help the hosts do? Like, who are the hosts? Who's the customer?
Yeah, and on the host side, and that one's, and I hear and I see where you're going with it. That one's a little bit difficult because if you talk about like a restaurant, right, it's attracting new customers.
So think about that very first initial niche market that's like, I'm in.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I've learned so much from different hosts that I wouldn't specifically say I'm going to start at.
Well, pick one.
host type.
If you had to pick one to build tomorrow.
Yeah, it'd probably be restaurants or hotels, smaller regional-based hotels.
Okay, what problem are you solving for them?
Attracting new customers and additional revenue streams.
I think the second
We had a
one
guy.
is easier.
We had a gentleman on the podcast a couple of weeks ago who was solving a particular issue for with disabilities, and he was trying to dig down and down and down. I said, "Well, what about the adjacent opportunities?" And he went, "Oh," and he started, and it just spun him off into literally in 3 weeks he was off into a whole new, not different from what he was trying to build, but it spun him off into another opportunity that he had not thought about. And I think that that's what Brandy is offering up. Like, so, and you've actually articulated, even though I may bring my house to the hotel, I'm going to tell my friends about this hotel that did such a great job that, you know, blah, 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 blah. So just a thought. Adjacents are always cool because it's like I didn't have to do anything to earn this value proposition. You know what I'm saying? To earn this additional value.
Is there anything about RVers in particular that makes them an attractive customer to whoever is hosting? Is there something about RV people who live the RV life that makes them someone you'd want to your city, you'd want to your event?
Yeah, generally speaking, on all the data that I could find, the majority of RV owners have more disposable discretionary income, however you want to kind of look at it, because they've already bought that expensive asset. The average data shows people that stay in a city in a hotel spend $250 to $500 a day. In my argument a lot with tourism bureaus right now is, for example, I was going to go to my cousin's wedding before I broke my arm at a hotel. It was $200 a night, $100 pet fee. So it would have been $500. I could have stayed at a brewery, maybe, or a restaurant around the corner for $30-50 a night. That difference there that us RVers would bring as we come to the city and not paying for a hotel, you're going to see it spent elsewhere, at the restaurants, at the jewelry stores that my wife wants to go to, buying new t-shirts and those types of things. So that's what I've found, and that's what the data kind of backs up of what's so attractive of why when people went to Pictured Rocks and the UP, why they're driving through Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, Detroit, wherever they're going back to, why we should give them easy spots to hang out for a night and check out the city.
And on the flip side of that, what did you find makes them an unattractive customer?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah, I think it would be the ones that are more needy for amenities. There's over 11 million RV owners in the United States, and 60% of them are self-contained. So that was one thing. It was good for me to learn a little bit more with customer discovery. And that was an assumption I kind of had at the beginning of my platform, meaning in order to be a member on my platform, and I want hosts to also know this, you have to be 100% self-contained. And that just more easily allows me to scale from a host location.
Meaning no dumping or anything like that?
Correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get a knock saying, I need to use your bathroom. Can you run a power cord? Can I get a hose? None of that stuff. There's no expectations.
All right. So for time, I know we want to get to the last section, but I will give everyone else a chance to, if there's any dying question they had.
I got one question that's killing me here, because I heard a contradiction in the fact that these are people with high disposable incomes, but they're also super frugal and don't want to spend on a hotel. I understand why. It's the same reason why families are better off in Airbnbs often than getting 3 hotel rooms for everyone to come together. But I'm wondering what percentage of the RVers you interviewed were interested in the frugality of that life versus the accessibility, and which one is a bigger driver?
That's a great question. I would say accessibility more than anything. I'm extremely frugal by nature, so I think that's where a lot of my bias comes from on that. But I've heard that from other people. But to answer your question, it was accessibility. It's still an ease. Repeating myself, we have a hotel on wheels. Everything's packed away. Everything's good to go. I know what my sheets are. I know who slept in my bed last. I know those are the type of things I kept hearing from people.
I'm curious to know, as a follow-up, if there was a difference in how there would be a difference in your answer if you were to evaluate those RVers who were self-contained versus not.
Can you say that one more time?
So Chris's question was about frugality versus accessibility, or maybe versus isn't the right term to use here. But for those folks who are self-contained in an RV, who I'm making assumptions here poorly, but maybe know what they're doing, that this is like more of a lifestyle. Do they care more about frugality versus accessibility versus folks who, this isn't something that they do with the same amount of frequency or the same amount of independence? Do they care about different things?
I guess I don't know the answer to that question yet. I'm not sure how to answer that.
If I may follow up on that, then how do you
That's a great undervalued answer in the world. And
Yes, I don't know.
I'm sorry to talk over Chris. I've tried very hard not to do it, but that is, hopefully we can go we won't go 45 minutes over. We're going to go 5 minutes over, but yes, that needed to be.
I wanted to throw a process question on that because I appreciate the follow-up you added. Thank you. But how are you going to down select to your first ICP between those options with the data that you have in terms of figuring out which RVers you really want to go after?
Do you want to lead him through? We can do that right now. That's the last piece of this for his AdWords.
Okay.
That's a good segue. Yep.
It's a perfect. And again, you can answer his, but for the sake of time, pick supply side or demand side, then narrow down on the customer within that segment, and then narrow down on the value proposition to that person. So I know I just said a lot in a row. So if you had for these ads, if you had to pick one and you couldn't spread it out, do you want to go after RV owners or hosts?
RV owners.
Okay. Which ones?
It would be people that are Class B RV owners. So they have the Sprinter van, the ProMaster, the Ford Transit, specifically that can park in a parking space. Just to educate people, essentially it's going to be like a 23-foot or shorter vehicle that can fit, into a parking space.
All right. Well, since you did that so cleanly, we'll offer 3. It's not about, access to the RV life or a hotel on wheels. We'll get each person on the call to kind of work through one value proposition, like a very super specific free water. I'll shut up. I'll ask each guest to get one super specific value proposition for that specific person. And they get bonus points if you can tie it back to a quote that you learned in your interviews. But even if you can't, hyper specific value proposition, bonus points if it ties back to a quote from your interviews.
So question I had is going even deeper, pet owners, because you talked about the pain of pet ownership. Would that be an area to drill down even deeper, or is there not enough evidence?
No, that is one. And for me personally, one major pain point of why myself and other RV owners want to park somewhere with electric is air conditioning. So if you have a couple dogs, those motorhomes or RVs can get really hot really fast. So that's one that I have to dive more into as I talk with people. Have you tried to run your air conditioner off your batteries? How long would it last? And, those kind of type of stories.
All right, we'll go rapid fire. John said, Patson, you came up with one value proposition to pet owners. Great job. Ty, you're next. 30 seconds per host, and we'll actually end on time-ish.
Thinking about proximity to activities. Period.
All right, what's your value proposition to RV owners who want access to activities that no one else is giving them?
You'll have resources to find public transportation and bike trails.
Fair enough.
Cool.
Angela.
Sorry, my mouse stopped working. Okay, I am going to go back to independents or introverts who maybe just want to do their thing and be left alone, but want to be closer.
What I think I can offer to that, so you don't have to barter, is I've built in a booking note. So we'll just say park where the orange cone is or where the green bucket is, and grab the power cord underneath the garage and pull it out. So it's less interaction if you don't want it. If you don't want to talk with people.
I'll jump in. You talked about a couple that was traveling to all of the MLB stations and people that are retired. So what about them?
I would connect them with host locations that also highlight what the local culture has to offer.
Think about the series across cities as well, Matt. Not just one location.
Well, I was going to build on that too, but I want to push back on your proposition, because I think you're going after the wrong side with anything you could spend on. Because if you don't have inventory of places for people to stay, you're not going to have anyone. You're not going to have any.
Chicken and egg. Yeah.
That's your business. Your business side requires that wing of the butterfly to flap first. And following on the ballpark thing, my neighbor actually was taking his 3-year-old son out of his own dream for his life to every ballpark in the country. One of the things I know about ballparks, particularly Wrigley Field, where I went a bunch of times as a kid, is that there's a lot of people in those neighborhoods who do parking, who do that stuff already. And I would suggest actually going to them specifically and asking them if they'd be interested in hosting out of towners for a part of the fee, or for whatever the mechanism of value exchange you have, and try to test that value proposition.
And I want to double tap on that quick, because Matt, you also said your riskiest assumption in your interviews was hosts, and then you wanted help in your comfort space with RVers. So just know we always like to play in the place that we're comfortable in.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think a lot of those, it's like, people have brought up Spot Hero for RVs before. Why aren't they doing this? Why isn't Airbnb doing it? So I agree with you. Those people that are kind of doing it pop up or a la carte, for sure, I want to talk with them and provide a software option and see if I could fill up half of their parking lot, and they only have to fill up the other half for an hour versus standing there for 3 hours. That can maybe be a value prop. What I'm hoping to do on the host side, I mean, yeah, you guys are absolutely right. It's a double-sided market. But I'm going to reach out to all of these host locations on competitor platforms and ask them, do you want to do something that's easier than bartering? And my hope is a lot of them are going to say, yeah, I'll try it. If you can get some more people in my parking lot or more people in my restaurant or my brewery, I'm into it.
Nice. Before we wrap up, this is great because we actually have a comment from LinkedIn as well. So this is from Quincy Savage, and he asks, how do you ensure safety, right? What's the value proposition? Have you seen data about people feeling safe with that? Because you mentioned about people banging on your door when you're in a Walmart parking lot. do you have
Yeah.
data for that? And then what would your value proposition be if you were to target that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of data in terms of customer discovery. Have people brought it up? Most definitely. What I would kind of always say to them is, you're in the city, so you've made that, you've made that what's that word I'm looking for? You've made that commitment already, of what you're getting into. You can use crime maps. Reviews is another one that I'm going to have, obviously, so people can say music was loud, people are messing with me, or anything like that.
I love Quincy to death, but on the did the data say anything? Of your 50 if it was split 50-50, how many of the interviews brought up safety as their primary pain point?
No, I wouldn't say that many brought it up, really.
We can see this working with Uber, right? They didn't worry about safety until they hit early majority.
Right. And there were issues. And the Airbnb, everyone remembers what happened, and there was $1 million, and then they had the $1 million policy after that. Yeah. It's a great question, but yeah, we're poking it. All right. Who wants the last word? And then Matt,
I want to come back and make a commentary on this for everyone, and for the whole thing. You mentioned earlier that it was awkward to ask consistent questions, and you weren't able to do so. And I want to say that is the job of discovery. The other bit is, you talked a lot about the education you had to do. That's not discovery. The discovery is questions and staying in curiosity. And so I would just encourage you, as you go forward, doing more of these and talking to more people, is to figure out what are the things you really need to know and continue to ask questions about that.
Absolutely.
All right, send it back to us. I think that's fair. All right, we put you on the spot for an hour. Give it back to us in 30 seconds or less.
Oh no, all these were really great questions. Yeah, people that are going through this process, what I would say is, you always have these big expectations and thought process and way you think you're going to do it, and just know that's not going to work most likely, and to keep evolving and pivoting, and keep an open mind the whole time, and take good notes. Use the AI tools that are available to you. And the Otter AI, like I said, so anything that will kind of take notes. It was just super helpful.
Excellent. All right. Well, Matt, thank you for being our guinea pig. This has been a lot of fun. Learned a lot about RVing and van life and all the joy that comes with that. So I think this has been educational for me, but hopefully something that you can take away as you roll out your site, your platform.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. So Adam, are we doing this again in a month or so?
We sure are.
We sure are.
January 17th. What's that Monday? Come on, I had all my notes ready to go.
Didn't do the math. Come on.
No, I
That's
didn't.
That's next year.
It's in Trello. It's there.
Awesome. So either January 13th or 20th, one of those two. We'll do this again. So
I want to say thank you to Angela, Brandy, Chris, Matt, of course, because you were like the guinea pig, but the three of you all coming on sight unseen. You've never met John or I. Adam, you're here. You kind of played in this experiment. We believe in experimenting, even as we're building. And so thank you. Really appreciate it. It's fun.
It's been a lot of fun.
13.
If you do that means you have to come back on at some point, right?
13.
And you have to, you got to come on. So, and bring somebody.
It's more than a first date. Exactly.
That's right.
Love it. Looking
Awesome.
forward to it.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great holiday season.
Thank you.
And
Have a
be
happy
well.
holiday.
Bye.
Good evening.